Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 39 of my Industrial Revolution 3 playthrough. In this episode, we are going to start using blast furnaces and start making blue circuits. Enjoy! And as far as resources that we can make, we're already doing the wood. That's the laser stuff, which we don't need to worry about right now. And we could probably upgrade our equipment later when we get to that point. So now, we're at blast furnaces. And we're almost done placing all the concrete too. So when that's done, the entire factory will be covered. We just need some silicon bricks. And because we already have the chromed items available on the bus, that means we probably need to send the silicon bricks all the way up there. And out of curiosity, how many would we actually need if this thing was going at the rate it normally would? Basically a whole belt of bricks. So, and can bricks be stacked? So plastic bars can, but it doesn't look like we can stack the silicon, so that means we need a whole nother belt for this. We're not really making them all that fast. 3 a second. So we really don't even need this to be red at all, but let's hope for the best. And make it red. I'm a wishful thinker. So we're going all the way up to the top here. And actually, it's going to require an incredible amount of chrome plates too. So this has no hope of running fast. It will for a little while, until the resources run out. And this is the first use of those reinforced plates. And there we go. Do we need to have 50 in there? Probably not. 10 ought to be pretty good. So there we go. There's the blast furnace. It's got the compressed air pipes that line up, and then it has an output of carbon dioxide. And you don't have to set a recipe. It will automatically take in copper of all forms, iron of all forms, or iron ingots to make steel, or silica to make silicon. And it could be fueled on either graphitic coke or regular coke. And that's cool that they gave graphitic coke a little bit of a use, considering otherwise it would be kind of junk. So which methods you use kind of depends on what you want to do. If you look at these buildings, they do have a 20% productivity bonus built in. So although they don't take modules, they are more efficient with materials. And in fact, that's basically the performance of 2 productivity module 3s. And there are important differences between the iron and copper recipes and then these alloys. Because to make silicon, the current recipe involves using coke, even though it's an electric furnace. Also with steel, it requires coke. But if you look at these recipes, it no longer does. Now, you still need to put coke in to power the machine, but now coke is not an element of the recipe anymore. So it actually saves you quite a bit in that sense, whereas the copper and iron never required coke, so now they are going to. But I would say that primarily this is a good way to generate lots of carbon dioxide, which will be then processed by trees and turned into oxygen. And it looks like we're basically filled up on that, so we probably need to dump it. So let's take care of that real quick before it overflows. Although carbon dioxide isn't a very dirty thing to vent, it would be better to just vent the oxygen instead, because all of those basic gases do not create any pollution at all when vented. So turning it into oxygen and then just venting the oxygen is actually cleaner. And I think the mod's really well balanced, where first you start with the gases and then you don't have to use the liquids, but man, does it make the logistics easier to deal with when you compress things down in liquid form first. So I like how you first start with the gases and then you get liquids. And actually, we're not even keeping it over there. That we're storing oxygen next to where the fertilizer is. Another thing I did was put a constant combinator in there to give 1 signals for the things that we can run out of a lot. So like we don't actually have 1 bitumen, we have 0, but I did the +1 on there just so the menu wasn't constantly flickering when 1 came in and left. And same with sour gas. But here we go. Fertilizer and ammonia are supposed to be full, but oxygen is not. And there's no point in hanging on to any more than that. That's equivalent of 100,000 of oxygen gas. And who knows how many of these we're going to need. But we can use this again, just to dump away the oxygen. Sure, we'll put it here. And it looks like finally, all of the concrete's been placed. So now our entire factory is paved. At least as much as it can be. There's still water, though. And I kind of want to just fill this in now, just so we don't have to walk around this. And that'll take a while. But we'll do an overflow valve So if there's too much, it gets removed. And even though the smoke is blue, if you look at the recipe pollution here, it is 0. So it is creating no pollution to vent the oxygen away, as you would expect. Although you would expect that, I don't think that's how like Angel Bob's works. I'm pretty sure the flare stacks, even if you're venting something like oxygen, it still is polluting. So it's cool that only the bad things, like ammonia, create pollution if you vent them. Now we need to calculate for these blast furnaces. First, we'll do the regular recipe for steel. Let's say we wanted to have 60 of them. It'd be 96 of these furnaces, and they would have the efficiency modules to clean them. It would require coke, but an extra thing we need to consider now is it actually needs to be powered. So let's calculate for that too. And that requires steam, which must come from a boiler. It has to be the iron boiler because that's what we have. And also we need to make sure we're burning the correct thing. And in this case, it would be coke. So that does add a little bit more coke to this recipe, that now we need about 6 per second to do this. And it would create 3.11 pollution a second. So we'll do a new line. Now calculating it from the blast furnaces, we want to have 60. And because of the productivity bonus that's built in, we only need to have 50 iron ingots to go in. And that's something we're not calculating for here, because technically we would need to mine this too. But let's not worry about that. That's set to graphitic coke, which is wrong. We definitely want it to be regular coke, which is much cleaner. It creates the output of carbon dioxide, which does have to be processed away, but we won't worry about that. We need some compressed air. And in doing so, that does take away some of the pollution. It's not all of it, so it creates 7.5 pollution. And getting the compressed air will take 1.66 of that back, so it doesn't completely counteract it, but it helps. And really, that's it. There's a little bit of energy that goes into this, but otherwise, that's it. So the pollution is definitely lower with electricity of 3.11 compared to 5.84. However, the coke input, so in other words, the fuel input is way less, where it's only 1.67 for the blast furnace, but it's 5.95 with the electric alloy furnace and also powering it with electricity. If we had nuclear power, we'd save a little bit of it, but still, the lion's share of that is this 5 a second. So you can see in the case of these alloys that use coke, it is much better to use the blast furnace. Not to mention, they're very fast, where we needed 96 of them for the electric recipe and only 40 for the blast furnace version. Let's calculate the same thing for silicon, and we're going to need a lot more silicon now. I think we're around 15 a second, and definitely we can consume more than that, so we probably want to at least have 30. That may not even be enough, but it has its input of coke. Even though this is a smaller component of it, we still need to calculate for the energy, so 5.2 megajoules. Now it comes from the iron boiler, and in comparison to the resources that go in, it's a more significant number. And again, we'll do it with the blast furnace. We want to have 30 of them. Wrong recipe for the coke. And the compressed air, which consumes some of the pollution. So it only needs 0.84 coke compared to 3.37. So again, a huge reduction in the amount of coke that goes into this. And in the case of silicon, the pollution values are actually very similar. There's no real disadvantage to using blast furnaces, whereas it does have a disadvantage of pollution when it comes to steel. So that's kind of interesting how that's different. Of course, doing this will also create carbon dioxide, which then can feed our trees, which will create free power and also free oxygen as well, which we are going to need in large quantities. So this is definitely something we want to do anyway. But now the question is, do we want to do this with copper and iron? Let's say we wanted 60 of them, and you have to set that recipe to coke and pull out the air, which takes a little bit of the pollution away. And that's the number we have, so we'll do it again, this time using the gas furnace. And in fact, that's really all we need to do because it's a gas furnace. So this certainly requires less resources, and it will create 4.8 pollution. And the gas furnace actually produces 5.4. So they're similar, but this is a tiny bit cleaner. However, as far as fuel is concerned, we're going to need to put 1.67 of coke into this, times 6 for the megajoules. So that's exactly 10 megajoules of fuel that need to go into this. However, for the natural gas, it's only 4.8 megajoules of fuel. So actually the natural gas furnaces are much more energy efficient than the blast furnaces are. So it's up to you if you want to upgrade to blast furnaces for iron and copper. It does give you the material bonus, which will probably help with energy consumption, but it's not going to be mind-blowing. And one other thing to consider is that we're really not that far away from having blue circuits, which will then allow us to do the electrum analysis pack. And then right here, we'll have the arc furnace, which is the other way of doing resources. Essentially, it's the late game way, where we basically stop doing ingots at all and just use molten metals. And they have a built-in productivity value as well. So do you really want to change out iron and copper and then just do it again with the arc furnace? Probably not. However, it is important to note that there is no better way of making, say, glass than we're doing it now. This is the best way. So it's the first way we got, and it never really changes. That's kind of the same thing as essentially coke, although you do get some of it from your oil processing. Most of it still is made the same way that we started. The machines change, but the recipe's the same. And it's important to note that with silicon, this new recipe is going to be the best way of doing it. Because if you check out the arc furnace, silicon is not in there. It's only the metals. So upgrading silicon is actually quite valuable because this is the best way to do it. Steel, a little bit less so, and slightly annoying because we already built it up. However, with steel and the other two, it's a little more debatable because steel is part of this recipe chain that you get. So silicon is for sure. Steel, maybe not. It's kind of up to you. And arc furnaces work by adding oxygen to the pure materials, and they only work on the pure materials. And then you get carbon dioxide on the way out. So since the carbon dioxide is turned back into oxygen at a 1:1 rate, it means it's only actually borrowing the oxygen. So you need to create an initial supply of oxygen, but after that, you're pretty good. So having some amount of blast furnaces is pretty important just to generate that oxygen. But how much we're actually going to need, it's hard to say, because just the silicon alone would make 150, and we'd get 300 from steel. And if we check out all of our setups here, they can only take care of that 150. So we would need to have a lot more trees than this. So I am hesitant to upgrading steel when we are probably just going to switch it over to the molten versions. Okay then, we have a build. For now, we'll just do the silicon with the blast furnace and see how that works. And working on those silicon carbide bricks, and they are disappearing. We could crank this up a little higher. I wonder if we should do 45 a second. And in fact, we actually need to plan for the entire build, not just that part. Because we are going to need silicon for the blue circuits as well. So we might want to just see if we can get an entire belt out of this. Well, the air filters will be pretty easy. This one machine creates them quite quickly. And just a couple of air compressors. But we do need the silica, which we now have the advanced crusher. So we need less of them. Do we have a ratio we might be able to use here? Kind of. In fact, that's actually basically what we're doing now. I'm kind of surprised it lines up like that, considering it didn't with glass. But I suppose the reason glass didn't is because these furnaces didn't get an upgrade in speed, whereas the crushers did. So since the blast furnace also got upgraded along with the crushers, it means we can essentially do the same setup as we're doing now. So we'll do 45 a second and as many groups as it takes. As far as where to make them, we could do it anywhere. We are making the bricks right here, but also we're going to need a bunch of the silicon basically right here, so somewhere around here makes sense. In fact, this area is open, depending on how big this is. We could just stick it in here, because what else would go there? And it is kind of nearby where stone is. And we need to do it in such a way where all the pipes will line up and probably have them touching each other like this. So we need as few pipes as possible. And I guess at this point, we're going to need some of those compressed air pipes. But at the same time, I'm not sure how many of them we're actually going to need. So although it will be dreadfully slow to handcraft some of these, for now I kind of want to. Let's see, this output, well, it can't really go there unless the pipe goes to some shared pipe in the middle, which it could. because this would have to go on each side. So could it be like this instead? The blast furnace would have one belt of input and one belt of output, or they could be on the same belt. But it's going to be wide one place or the other, because that's what it would look like with inserters. So let's flip them over here. Actually, could these be the short pipes? Looks like it. So it would basically be something like this. Is this a job for a substation? Fortunately, it doesn't quite fit in there, although it does fit here. So I don't know, maybe this is a job for a substation. We could probably figure that out. So can we do the same thing, but now on this side? Oh yeah. Where that shoots it into there. Then we have these compressed air pipes right there. Oh, the handcrafting is going to take a long time. I was thinking I didn't want to have them in my inventory, so what's the point in making them? But even still, we should probably make them and just not bother making any requests for them for our inventory. Seems like that would be the best option here. And in fact, it's basically going to be the same set of machines. Even the inserters are going to be pulling from the same place because it's an iron item. So yeah, it would basically be right there. The recipes might be slightly different, but also I kind of don't care, so as long as it works, I don't feel the need to mess with it too much. So there we go. Actually, believe it or not, we need faster inserters. So there, we can hook those up. We'll figure out the substations later. Although they don't quite reach that other side though, so maybe they just need regular power poles. Okay then, we basically need to have about 4 of these, which seems like it would fit fine in here. Let's see if it does. Although we probably want some of this space to be available for other things, so let's actually push this maybe right there. So if we've gotten this right, everything should line up. Yeah, it basically does right here. And not quite enough room there. But this belt just kind of goes up and goes around. It really doesn't need to do that. It can go straight through, and in fact it almost can. And one more in there. So actually, could these substations have worked? Actually, yeah, they could have just fine. Okay, let's do that. It would just be cleaner if we could. And cleaner is better. Another thing we need to calculate for is turning all that carbon dioxide into liquid form so it can be put on the pipes. And one of those does 50, which is easy, and we need 5 of them. And as far as getting the compressed air, you could try to position those somewhere where you're making a lot of pollution, like down here. But honestly, as long as it's not a completely clean chunk like it kind of is right here, you're not wasting any pollution gathering capacity. And it looks like those 2 tree farms have completely caught up, and these 2 are getting close. And hopefully, when they're above 95% health, all these filters will turn off, and it'll just kind of cycle on and off as required. But since there's pollution everywhere, especially that this setup is going to generate more pollution than the air compressors will save, it does kind of make sense to just gather it from right here. Well, we're just about to replace this, so we can pull it out. It was kind of haphazardly put in here. And got to plop modules in there, but modules only go into electric furnaces, so the blast furnaces don't use any. And there needs to be a side switch, or at least it would be useful, halfway through here. So right here. And there is not much room in here. So those are fueled up and ready to go. We need 2.5 of these, but I'm thinking we'll just do 4 of them. 1 on each side here, and at least they'll be in different chunks. And they just require air filters and make compressed air. Then we need 2 more airship stations to save ourselves some belts. Plop that in there, and we'll call this silicon filter left unload. And then after that, it goes up to tree filter. That's the right side unload, and it's sending it to the left side. And then finally, where it's actually picking up the filters, it will go to the right side. So if I set that correctly up, it should do the rounds. And then we just need some stone. We actually need to put the filters in these, so unfortunately it just doesn't copy over. And we can't use the picker dollies either. But they're going. This doesn't need to be red, but since it already is, we'll just keep it red. Okay. So there we go. Blast furnaces have a cool red glow to them. An interesting sound. It's kind of hard to hear them, but they're there. And as you can see, it's very fast, and it has its productivity bonus to it. And is very quickly filling up on the carbon dioxide. There's more room here, so let's do it down here. And it's generating the carbon dioxide pretty fast. So how come this isn't going? No compressed air. Oh, because no filters. Which will catch up over time. It's already doing it. But there we go. Lots and lots of silicon. And you can see that carbon dioxide is very rapidly building up. So I had this set up so it would only go through this one forestry. I'm not sure if the trees recover faster, if they're actively being grown or not. It doesn't seem like it, but since we know that they grow regardless, we can hook everything back up and just let it work naturally. And clear out any rocks or cliffs or anything that are still in here, and we'll have to see how that works. If we really need more carbon dioxide, I guess we could do steel with the blast furnace, but I kind of just don't want to, because it really seems like the kind of thing we're just going to replace soon. Well, I suppose it's time to start researching. We'll see if our red and green circuits can hold up now. And hey, all that landfill got placed. And pave. But it's time to keep this going. We're basically caught up, with the exception of some military technologies that we don't really need right now. So now the goal is to do electronics 3. So one step of that is to make metal foam, bubble inert gases through molten alloys to produce low density structures. So lots of steel and a little bit of chromium and some nitrogen will create some steel foam, and this will actually consume the nitrogen, not borrow it. And that is similar to the beam lasers where they consume the helium. So now we're at the point where we are using those gases. But to do that, we'll create a small 2 steel foams, and then also we're going to need to make electrum, an advanced crystalline alloy with exceptional durability and unusual electromagnetic properties. This is an interesting one, where it's an alloy, but we have to do it with the pure resources, and that is gold and platinum. And if you look at our setup here, it already generates gold and platinum. So we essentially just need to pull some of the input off of this in order to make electrum. But it's going to be a big consumer of gold now, and all of that will make 1 crystal. And then if we take that crystal and we use liquid nitrogen, we will get 10 sheets out of it, which is essentially the 10 input resources that went into it. And then the nitrogen is in gas form again, but we just borrow the nitrogen for that process. And the reinforced null field plate. So electrum sheet, chrome rivets, and borrow some nitrogen, and that will make the plate. So we do all of that, and finally we're at the big gating resource of the end game, and that's blue circuits. So we can take electrum sheets and graphene, add some sulfuric acid, borrow some nitrogen, and that will create the field effect nanomesh. And this has to be made in a laser assembler. It's got the little laser symbol. And then to make the miniaturized gate array, we need that mesh, some silicon, the gold-plated wire, and borrow some nitrogen to make 2 of them. And then the revolutionary circuit requires those gate arrays, as well as some semiconducting triouts. That's interesting that it requires the tier 2 input, and the nanoglass, and the gold, and to borrow some nitrogen, and we create 1 circuit, and all of that has to be done in laser assemblers. And of course, we can make the computer by combining red circuits and blue ones. At least we don't have to put the green ones into this, as well as a small chromed frame, and very interestingly, a heatsink. So now we're going to be manufacturing heatsinks for this purpose. And then if we want to make a big frame, which goes into all of the big machines, it's that revolutionary computer and chrome parts. And finally, if we want to actually research new things, we're going to need the gold pack, or the electrum analysis pack, which is blue circuits that reinforce null field plate from before. Interestingly, a high capacity battery, and steel foam. So that's a lot that's going to go into that. And then the end game will be before us. But we might as well keep the research going, make our laser stuff better. Probably going to be using tons of power now, basically. And starting to make silicon. Which, of course, is making our carbon dioxide. Definitely making a lot of wood now, which turns into free power. Okay, we've got the steel foam that we can make. And it doesn't go into that much stuff. Essentially, it goes into rocket parts, so we could make this anywhere and just ship it around. And we should probably just kind of make it big. How much do we want? Well, what would 30 look like? Is that too much? Yes it is. It has to be done in the electric alloy furnace. There's no other way of doing it. But that's obviously not going to happen. The chromium could keep up, but the steel can't. And this steel is going to be going into other things. So even if we max this out, that's probably still way too much. But at the same time, if we built this once, we would never have to build it ever again. So we should probably make something that's prepared for the future. And since it requires a lot of chromium ingots, we might want to make this near where chromium is being made. Also, it needs nitrogen, which we can get from the warming. And that's just 6 heat exchangers. So 1 gas and 2 solids. I don't know if we have any electric alloy furnaces that are doing anything like this. It's actually a really straightforward build, so we can probably just kind of build something fresh. So off to the side somewhere, and luckily the pipe connections are all nice and lined up with each other. 12, 16, 20, 24. And same thing again. We haven't been receiving blue belts in a while. Wonder why that is. Guess we'll check it in a bit. So steel can come in there. And the chromium will come from over there. There we go. Nitrogen is in there. Let's make some steel foam. There we go. No achievement for that. And our nitrogen is going to disappear very quickly. So now we need to do electrum, which then goes into making electrum sheets. And these electric sheets do go into a few things, but because the electrum crystal is compressed all the way down from 10 sheets into 1, we should probably just send the crystals around to avoid having throughput issues on these sheets, even though it'll be very dense on the belt. So let's make a ton of crystals, and who knows how many we're going to need. But let's just plan based on what our output is. And if we go to one of our builds here, we can see that we would have 30 of the primary and 15 of the second. So doing about 4.25 seems pretty reasonable, and that is a lot of cubic presses. But we want to try to build for the future here, and that'll certainly do it. It is annoying we're going to have to split both of the resources off here again. I mean, we essentially have already done it. It's really annoying, but this thing we built here seems to work. Fortunately, this is right in the way. Oh, but there are some other places we can put it. So doing that, we'll pull off the platinum. And this is a little broken in the sense to where whether or not we do the hot water or cold water depends on this chest. We could do a second chest, though, and have it come through here and just base it on either of those conditions. So that is something we can do, and we probably should. So that will pull the platinum off, but also we need to be able to pull off the gold as well. So if we do that, that side will get priority. So there's a lot of zigzagging that's happening in here. But let's move this down here and have a second combinator. Let's say less than 100 platinum. We'll use the green wire. It will give the green circle. And I'm kind of wondering if we're at the point where we want to record the status of these warehouses as well, since they are technically separate from over here. Well, for it to work, that green wire needs to be shared right here. Probably shouldn't stand right there on the tracks. So there we go. So let's see if all of this works. So gold goes through. It's pulling out the platinum. It seems to be full flow. Those are going to build up. And it is running on hot water, so that much is working. And there we go. We've got platinum. Let's wait for it to get above 100. It does, and now it's using cold water again. So, that was a patch that seems to be working. Well, now we need an incredible amount of these presses. It's basically this, just at a very large scale. So, 26. 52 of them. And there's our 68. Let's actually make these things on the bus, and 68 of them is a lot. So let's make a ton of them. And how are the trees doing? 88%, 94%, so they are healing. This bus is starting to get kind of long, so I sort of want to kind of figure out how big we want to make this. How about 4 more sets of belts? Compared to what we're using now, that's still quite a lot. Okay, the trees are being damaged here. That kind of makes sense because they're at basically full blast, so what it's doing is waiting for the trees to get below essentially 90% health. These filters should then turn on and start saving the trees. Really, it's just kind of a liability to have these trees so close to pollution. We really need to push them out here somewhere, but for now, and there it goes. This is where they are, and it makes that noise when trees get injured, but it's working. Cool. Well, there's a little bit more research we can do, and after that, we are caught up and ready for the Electrum age here. And all our nitrogen is disappearing. That's not good. So we're probably at the point where we need to start manually making it, which I guess we should try to do. And how fast? Well, I suppose it depends on how fast we need it. And it's 112. So let's plan for this. That we would want to do air separation. It's 112, but this is in liquid form, so be somewhere around 30. How about let's compute by factory and just do 2 of them. It'll give us a tiny bit of helium, a little bit of oxygen, and nitrogen. We could do the recipe that just gives us the nitrogen, but we kind of want helium too. Although we are about to be overloaded on it, and I'm fine with just dumping those because we kind of want to keep the oxygen, and then that will require simply 2 air compressors. So that is convenient, where it's 1 air compressor to 1 cryo plant, and it does consume pollution. Oh my goodness. Whew. It's getting pretty bad in here. Even these trees are starting to get hurt, which is not great. But this did turn on once they got below 90%, so it seems to be working. But since the pollution is basically everywhere, it doesn't seem like it's going to make much a difference where we decide to pull it out from. So let's just make it here because that's where we're storing these other gases. We are going to need to get the filters in here, likely delivered by airship, and we'll call this gas filter unload. And when it gets here, we'll send it to filter load. Then we need to change the path that when it gets here, first stop is actually gas filter unload. So in a few moments they should get here. And research is done. So that takes care of nitrogen. Well, there's one of 3 conditions that would cause this to run. It is nice that these start in liquid form. I guess we'll put it right here. But it's essentially any of those gases are too low. So if oxygen is below, let's say 5,000, green signal. Also if nitrogen, and also if helium. They are on the green wire here. And these will turn on simply if there is a green signal. And they're getting them. Hello, airship again. And they are going. It's only going to produce 25 a second, which isn't very fast, but the level is going up. And now we're finding ourselves a little overloaded on the helium. And I don't think we're actually venting it anywhere. And who knows where to put all of these. Hopefully somewhere kind of out of the way. How about like down here? And there we go, venting the helium away, which is another clean process. And that should keep us topped up. Okay, time to make a bunch of frames. And yeah, it's making them. Okay, that's going to be a lot of production. Probably can't keep up with it, but it's going to be a lot of frames at least. Oh, I didn't connect the liquid oxygen here. That's because it was nowhere nearby. Well, it's certainly making lots of computers. We're working our way to this cubic press here. So this gets a few engines, a whole bunch of pistons, these plates, which are already sent up here. And then we just need the computers to get in however we want them to. How about like right here? It's a long way for them to go though. And this is why we leave spaces in here, because you never know when you might want to send something in. Here they come. And it's a little slow. That's fine. We don't need to make these machines very fast. And let's shoot the computers over, which will allow us to make the big frames. And there they go. Well, while we're waiting for that to be built, we can start planning for some of this other stuff. So in order to make this analysis pack, we're going to need some blue circuits. So let's see if we can figure out those. Who knows how many of them we're going to want. Guess it depends on these other setups. So 12, and that one's really small. It does 20. Probably at least 15, assuming we can make this work. Well, that's 15 nanoglass, which is probably basically everything that we're doing. Pretty much. So that's probably a good number. But because of all of these big throughput things, we probably want to do direct insertion of some sort. So first we need the triodes. Let's calculate this down in the machine where one machine goes into two, which is pretty good. It'll get the silicon from somewhere, the foil, the tinned wire, and we can increase this. So we're down to one machine again. So it's one machine into two, into four, and that handles the triodes. So doing the gate arrays, and actually we should probably calculate for the wire here. It's going to need some electroplaters, and also since the number isn't very big, we probably can do those somewhere else. So the big numbers are these gate arrays, and it's not quite 1-to-1, but it's pretty close. In fact, if we drop that out, it essentially becomes 1-to-1. It gets its silicon from somewhere, the wire from somewhere, and the thing we need to make is the field effect nanomesh. And again, take the speed out of there because it's essentially a 1-to-1 ratio. It'll have acid from somewhere, and then it needs the electrum sheets, which is a 2-to-1 ratio. It needs the graphene, which is a 2-to-1 ratio. And that's a lot of stuff, but I think we're getting close here. We can have the electroplaters making the gold wire off to the side. The nanoglass will come from somewhere. Of course, all of the ingots will come from somewhere. The helium is just a loop. But we do need to do the liquid nitrogen, which requires quite a few machines, but it's just barring the nitrogen, so it's fine. And then that's the setup. Of course, we can build a lot of these to get higher throughput, but we can't really do anything too crazy, to be honest, because this is already taking up quite a bit of silicon in the end. It actually takes up quite a bit of everything. So it would be something like that. But before we get started, we're going to need the gold plating solution, and that's 40 a second, but we already have a setup here. Probably does way more than that. It does. But since we've already built it, and I'm guessing the recipe doesn't change too much, we should probably just reuse it. It's a little simpler. It just requires gold, but otherwise is similar. And we can essentially do the same build and just only have gold in the middle. We could share these pipes if we really wanted the brownie points, but I think it's fine just to put it in there. So we're a little short on modules, which is interesting, but I guess we can hook this up first and see how it works. It's just basically liquefying a bunch of gold with wonderful gold-colored smoke. But that's working. And time to switch these over to electrum. Luckily or unluckily, we don't have to worry about belt stacking or anything. Man, these are going to require so much power. But there it goes. Silently making some electrum crystals, which will then be available for where we need them, and that's interesting. I guess it makes sense that some items could make it through. So I think on this one we'll need to have a filter, and it's kind of messy, but anything that's left over can go back into the system. Although it actually needs to be on this other side. Not that it really matters too much, but now that's the power of having the picker dollies, is keeping those wires connected while also moving things to make it all work out. Okay, I think we definitely need to have red belts in the middle here. Seems to be working. Does that mean we have everything we need for this? Because we'll have the electrum, we'll have plastic, of course all of the bars, the silicon, the nanoglass. I think so. So we'll need to make this and then figure out how to copy it, but oh man, looks like we're overloaded on oxygen. We should be dumping it, and we are. We're just not getting rid of it fast enough. 4 more. Man, something on here is going to be messed up and I'm going to be super sad. That gets that taken care of, that and that. Then we just need to deliver these items. But let's see here, any extra pipes? Let's color by system here, so we can see if something isn't quite right. And definitely right here, there isn't. Same right there. Same right there. We want it to be completely symmetrical. Man, that is so much going on there. But I think it does it. So, if I did this correctly, all of this should be copyable for the most part. It looks like this one right here, we don't want those two. I think that actually does it. That's crazy. Are we ready? It totally fits. Okay then. Oh, I'm getting nervous. There's a lot of craziness in there for this. A lot of direct insertion. Okay, well, we need to kind of crank this back up to the full numbers so we know the supporting components, but also it's time to put that somewhere where it can expand. Maybe like right here. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. I really hope this works. You never quite know. Surprised we were able to make it work without... Look at all the robots. Without too many power poles in there. Wow, we're going to need to have 34 cryo plants. And actually enough of the gas that pipe throughput might be an issue. That's going to be substantial. Well, we didn't quite see it, but that was the result of some rockets being fired. Well, they didn't damage the turrets. Well, the wall sure got slammed, but it held. And ultimately, it's just a couple of repair packs, which is no big deal. But last thing here is the gold wire, which could go anywhere. Luckily, it's not too big, really. Let's just put it on the other side. And to make it take up less space, we'll do the L. Okay. I think that's most of the machine, so now it's just a question of getting it all hooked up. Okay. Everything should be hooked up. The electroplaters are correctly working. One thing I used was an airship, this time on the blue color, in order to deliver all this electrum, because it's coming from all the way over there, and in the end we only need about 2 of it a second, so we didn't need to run a huge belt across the factory just for that. Well, first, let's put in the nanoglass and the gold wire, so that seems to be working. And lots of splash noises as the wire is being electroplated. Okay, let's put in all of that liquid nitrogen, which should take a while to fill up, but it's all connected now. It's a lot. Well, when stuff is in there, we should see some colors. Alright, so that's not quite completely connected. There we go. The colors look right. And that's going to drain our factory of nitrogen for a while. And now it's time to hook up the helium centipede here. Might take a few moments to get this seated. Let's see here. Let's put in the copper and tin. Copper goes into the stackers. And I see one issue we have here. Well, first of all, that's set to the wrong thing, but also it needs to go through the unstacker. There's always little bugs to find. Nothing ever works right the first time. And this one will work if it's just set to the stacks. Okay. How we doing on helium? Well, that basically filled it up. Okay, silicon and gold. The gold just gets automatically picked up because silicon can't be stacked or unstacked. So plastic and electrum, which will make the graphene and these electrum sheets. Let's check to make sure that the hydrogen centipede works. Let's see, helium is not entering. But I guess that makes sense because it kind of has to start at the back. You got to go all the way down. And there they go. Green and yellow lasers. Oh, it's kind of funny seeing all the gases slosh around in there. But I think it worked. Yeah, the resources are in each one. And we definitely don't need these inserters on the very end. It's actually kind of a problem, because these ones on the end are only going to work at half speed. But the ones in the middle have to run at full speed. Well, we'll see if it works. So now we need sulfuric acid. More lasers. And these ones don't have their acid at all, because the pipes are on the other side. Which means now we just need the silicon, which creates the miniaturized gate arrays, which is the only thing that doesn't have. So it looks like I remembered everything. Fantastic. How much silicon did this whole thing make? Oh, it actually needs to be blue. But achievement unlocked, so that's good. And there's definitely not enough room to switch the sides on this. So let's just make it blue. It's kind of hard to tell. There's pulsing going on. It really shouldn't pulse. We actually don't have to do the helium centipede here, because I'm not sure if that's going to cause issues or not. Like, the centipede doesn't, but having the machine on the end be slower than the rest of them seems bad. So there we go. They're all connected to the common pipe now. So, it's a lot going on in there. But I do believe it's set up correctly. I guess we can do one more test by sending these to the main bus. So there it goes. That should be a torture test of this. Once it all clears out, there's going to be a lot of movement. Well, that helps. Different kind of blue circuits, but sure. It basically seems to be working. That's cool how there's blue lasers there. I guess the lasers are color-coded based on the item that they make. But what we would want to see is essentially all these circuit machines going, and they're not. Because... oh yeah, in fact, that basically needs to be blue. We using a lot of power? Well, kind of. Actually, believe it or not, these cryogenic plants are actually our biggest energy consumer. There's a lot going on. It's kind of hard to see, but I think most of the lights are the correct color. No gold. Oh, that's a problem. Well, let's stop production for a second then. I think we can essentially solve this by going in both sides. It's annoying, but that's a bit of an oversight there on belt throughput. And we need to go up to halfway, which is this machine. And they stop there. So that should fix the belt issue. And here we go again. Luckily all the fluids seem to be balanced out. That was the part I was worried about. Of course, all of this I was worried about too, but now that it's going in both sides, Hopefully we have all green lights. Just about everything should be green because it's just about a perfectly balanced setup with the exception of some of these smaller machines. And it seems to be, actually. Shockingly. It's all green. Awesome. I was not necessarily expecting to see that with something this big. But it's working. And cool, because we're going to need a lot of that. And if we need another one of these, well, we can just copy it, basically the whole thing, and put it over here, and now we have more blue circuits. Well, now that we have blue circuits, we could make the revolutionary computer and also the chromed frame, but that really won't go into anything because now we need to make the electrum analysis pack. And now that we have lots of blue circuits, we can see what we can do. And I kind of want to check just to make sure that we're making 1.86. So if we come here, say 1.86, how many circuits do we need? 7.44. So the 13 that we're making is more than enough. What about the rest of this stuff? Well, and actually, can use some productivities in there. Now it's super duper enough. Well, the null plate uses a little bit of that stuff. Electrum sheet, which is easy to make. We need to make some batteries now. We're already making them, but now we really need to crank them out. Gonna use lots of lead, lots of sulfuric acid. We're already making those chromed items. And we need 3 foam a second, and we're making 15, kind of, if we had enough ingots. And we'll need to make some of that liquid nitrogen. But other than that, it's looking pretty good. So let's get started on this science build. However, that's going to have to wait till the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.